I fell on my front steps and broke my hip. 4 weeks in rehab. Pain meds, forms I barely remember. I took a rideshare home and froze. My name was off the mailbox, my key didn't work. My daughter-in-law stood in my doorway and said, "You don't live here." They told people I was confused. They filed for guardianship. I didn't scream, I built a binder. Then my neighbor pressed play on a porch recording, and I heard the plan, word for word. I made one call. In court, the room went quiet when I said 4 words, "Roll the porch footage." Before I show you the clip that flipped the judge and the page that ended their scheme, tap subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from, and please share this story with one person. You never know who might be going through something like this. Now let's get into it. I still wake up some mornings expecting to see my late husband's slippers by the door. 32 years of quiet routines don't just vanish overnight, not even after you've lost the love of your life. My name is Hattie Reynolds. I'm 66, widowed, and living in the same modest 2-bedroom home in Augusta I bought with my husband Walter back in 1989. Paid in full, hardwood floors that creak in all the right places, a lemon tree out back that won't grow fruit, but I love it anyway. My house, my peace. Most mornings, I'd wake up early, feed the blue jays that visit my porch, and walk out to the mailbox in my robe and slippers. That's exactly what I was doing the morning I slipped. It had rained the night before. I stepped off the porch like I always did, except this time, I didn't see the black ice that had formed on the walkway. My foot shot forward like a rug was pulled from under me. My elbow cracked the pavement. My hip twisted sharply. But it was the silence afterward that scared me most. Nobody saw it happen. Nobody came running. I lay there, crumpled, looking up at the morning sky while the birds pecked at seed nearby. The ambulance came quick. The ER said it was a minor fracture. Just a chip in the hip, the doctor said. But at my age, there's no such thing as a minor fracture. They recommended surgery. Not major, just a few pins. And after that, inpatient rehab. I told them no, straight up. "I can recover at home," I said. "I don't need no facility with strangers wiping my face." But my son Marcus didn't like that idea, and his wife Kiana, well, she made sure I understood just how inconvenient my independence was. But Kiana Dawson back then, before she'd styled herself into a woman who never misplaced a smile. "Mama, you gotta let us help you," Marcus said, sitting at my bedside, holding my hand like the little boy I used to tuck in at night. "You rest up. We'll take care of the house." Kiana chimed in, softer than usual, which should have been a red flag. "Just for a few weeks, Miss Hattie. Let the professionals get you strong again. We'll keep the place spotless." I hesitated, but they looked so sure, like they'd already made peace with it for me. So I agreed, just for a few weeks. The rehab facility wasn't a horror show. They had clean sheets, friendly nurses, and a little garden courtyard where the patients were wheeled out for fresh air. But the walls still felt like they were pressing in on me. Everything smelled faintly like antiseptic and boiled cabbage. I missed my windows, my porch, my quiet. The first few days, Marcus called twice a day, Kiana once. The nurses knew my son's name before I had to say it. It gave me comfort. By week 2, it slowed. Calls came every few days, then once a week. "It's just a busy time," I told myself. New baby niece, job, house stuff. I left messages, texted, sent photos. Most of the time I got short replies like, "All good here," or "Don't worry, Mama, rest up." But it wasn't just the quiet, it was the staff. "You're lucky," the social worker smiled one morning. "Your daughter-in-law's been handling all your paperwork like clockwork." My paperwork? Yeah, bills, mail, all of it. She said you appointed her to manage everything while you recovered. I didn't remember doing that, but maybe I had. There were a few pain-fogged days after the surgery, and Kiana had brought me a stack of forms to sign. She'd said it was just for insurance. It didn't sit right, but I was too tired to press it. Then came the group therapy session. They wanted us to talk about accepting aging. A lady across from me, Ruth, said her daughter had moved into her house while she was in rehab. "Just until you're better, Ma," she'd said. Now Ruth was staying in an assisted living center she hadn't picked, while her daughter's name was on the deed. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about those forms, about my house, about my name. I called Marcus the next morning. No answer. I called Kiana, straight to voicemail. When the discharge paperwork finally came, 4 weeks later, I felt more anxious than relieved. The nurse handed me my phone, my purse, and said, "You're all set. Your daughter-in-law said she'll be waiting." I blinked. "She's picking me up?" No, she arranged a rideshare for you. Said she couldn't get away from the house today." I sat silently in the back of a gray Toyota with my suitcase by my side and a lump in my throat. The driver tried making small talk. I smiled politely but barely heard a word. Every turn we made, my heart beat faster. I was finally going home. At least, that's what I thought. The rideshare pulled up to my curb at exactly 3:17 p.m. I knew that because I glanced at the digital clock on the dash and felt a nervous flutter in my chest. That little house, my house, sat there looking the same as always, except something felt off. The porch light was different. It had one of those modern, smart bulbs that slowly shifts colors. Mine had been a yellow bulb Walter put in 20 years ago and refused to change. The front lawn, always a little wild the way I liked it, was perfectly trimmed. A new potted plant sat by the door, a fake fern. I got out of the car slowly, suitcase in hand, my hips still sore from the surgery. I thanked the driver, adjusted my coat, and walked up the steps. That's when I saw it. My name was gone from the mailbox. Instead of Reynolds, it now read, Marcus and Kiana Taylor. Marcus took Kiana's last name when they married, said it made banking simpler. I didn't argue. I should have asked why. My stomach tightened. I reached for my keys and tried the front door. Nothing. I jiggled the key, tried again. Still locked. I rang the doorbell. Kiana opened the door after a pause. Her expression didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. Smug, unbothered, arms crossed. "Miss Hattie," she said, "what are you doing here?" I stared at her. "I live here." She gave a soft chuckle. "Not anymore." I didn't speak. Couldn't. She stepped out, gently pulling the door closed behind her like she didn't want me to see what was inside. You signed over the house, remember?" she said sweetly. "Back when you were in rehab." My blood ran cold. I felt dizzy. Kiana reached down and picked up a duffel bag from behind the flower pot. "We packed your things, the essentials. You can get the rest later, just let us know when." She handed me the bag like I was some stranger who'd left it behind at a train station. Whatever was inside the bag wasn't mine, and neither was the story they were writing for me. "I need to speak to Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "He's not home," she replied instantly. "And even if he was, this wouldn't change anything." "Kiana, this is my home. I never gave you—" "You don't remember?" she interrupted, blinking wide. "You weren't doing too well in rehab. There were days you couldn't even tell what month it was. That's why you signed it over, for your own good." "I want to see the papers," I said, now shaking. She shrugged. "We'll send you a copy, but you really should focus on getting better, Miss Hattie. You're not well." Then she smiled. That kind of smile that people give you when they know they've already won. I turned and walked down the steps like a ghost. The rideshare driver had already pulled away. I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase and my so-called essentials in a bag I didn't recognize. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears wouldn't come until I was inside the motel. That night, I checked into a small roadside inn 2 blocks from the grocery store, the kind of place that smells like old smoke even in the non-smoking rooms. I paid in cash. I didn't want a paper trail, not yet. Something told me this wasn't a mistake, this was planned. I opened the duffel bag. There were 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a manila envelope. Inside the envelope was my rehab discharge paperwork, and nothing else. No mail, no bills, no deed, nothing from the house, no wedding ring, no photo of Walter from the mantel. They hadn't packed my life. They'd packed me away. I sat on the bed for a long time, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Then, like a fool, I called Marcus, straight to voicemail. I called again and again. Finally, on the 5th try, he answered. "Mama?" His voice was calm, flat, no trace of panic or apology. "What is happening?" I asked. He sighed. "Kiana explained it to you, right? We're staying at the house now. You needed care." "I needed a place to come home to," I shouted. "That's my house. I never gave you permission." "You weren't in a state to make decisions, Mama," he said, a little firmer. Kiana stepped up. "We thought it was best." "Best for who?" Silence. "Son, listen to me," I said, forcing myself to stay steady. "You need to fix this. I'm giving you a chance to fix this before—" He cut me off. "I gotta go." And then the line went dead. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept running it over in my head. The silence during rehab, the paperwork, the sudden disconnection, and now the locks, the new mailbox, the smug look on Kiana's face, and it was all part of something bigger. But the part that hurt more than anything was the voice of my son, the same boy I nursed through chickenpox, the same boy who sobbed when his goldfish died, talking to me like a stranger, like a burden, like a liability. I didn't know it yet, but someone 2 doors down had been recording proof I was still in the right. That next morning, I went to the police station. I brought my ID, the property tax bill, even a photo of me standing on that porch with Walter and Marcus from 1998. The officer at the front desk was kind but dismissive. "If they've got a notarized deed with their names on it, ma'am, it's a civil issue, not criminal." I left the station feeling like I'd been mugged in broad daylight and told to take it up with customer service. I wandered around town for hours, past the diner where I used to get pie with Walter, past the florist where I worked part-time for 15 years. Nothing looked the same, or maybe I didn't. At dusk, I found myself standing across the street from my house. I don't know what I was hoping for. An apology? A light in the window? A sliver of my old life peeking through the blinds? But what I saw instead chilled me. Kiana was on the front porch, laughing into her phone, sipping wine like she'd lived there for years. She turned her head slightly and caught a glimpse of me. She saw me, paused for half a second, then smiled, like I was just another stranger passing by. I hadn't come for a wave. I'd come for a crack in their story, raised her glass, and waved. I sat on the motel bed staring at the ceiling, phone gripped in one hand, police report in the other. The words kept echoing in my head like a mocking chorus. "It's a civil matter." I hadn't been expecting handcuffs or sirens, but I thought surely a woman being locked out of her own home would mean something, that a tax bill in my name, a 30-year mortgage paid in full, a photo of me and Walter on that porch would stand for something. Apparently not. The officer was polite, respectful even, but his answer stayed the same. "Ma'am, if the deed is legally signed over and notarized, we can't do anything. You'll need to consult a civil attorney. If escrow's pending, ask for a temporary restraining order today." The officer added, softer. "Civil can still move fast." So I nodded, thanked him, walked out of the station with my papers still in hand. I didn't even make it to the parking lot before my knees gave out. There was a bench outside the courthouse steps. I sat there for over an hour, just sat. People passed by. No one noticed the old lady clutching a manila folder like it was her last lifeline. That night, I tried calling Marcus again, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't trust myself not to scream. I went back the next day. I stood on the sidewalk across from my house, no, their house now, watching like a stranger. My feet ached. My heart did worse. Kiana came out with a bag of trash and noticed me. She didn't pretend this time. She walked right up to the edge of the porch, phone in hand. "If you don't leave," she said, "I'll call the police. This is harassment, Miss Hattie." "Harassment?" This is my house. Was your house. You barely knew what day it was in rehab. We helped you. I never signed. She cut me off, holding up her phone. Leave or I'm calling. I didn't test her. I walked away again. I spent the next 4 days holed up in that musty motel room, curtains drawn, phone silenced. I didn't eat much, couldn't sleep. I just sat there, trying to puzzle out the moments when my life had slipped from my grip. A memory hit me mid-morning, a detail I hadn't thought about in years. Marcus, 16 years old, crying because he wrecked his father's car. The passenger mirror was sheared off. The bumper scratched, and he was scared we'd throw him out of the house. Walter had yelled, of course, but me? I hugged him. Told him we'd figure it out. Told him mistakes didn't make him less of a man. Told him he could always come home. I wondered now if he ever remembered that, because the boy I raised, the one who used to cry over scraped knees and forgotten lunches, wasn't the man who locked his mama out of her house. I opened my little notebook and started writing. I listed everything I could remember: the day I fell, the date of the surgery, the names of the rehab staff, the dates of the signed forms Kiana brought in, the texts and calls that stopped, the names on the mailbox, the ride home. I even wrote down what the house smelled like last time I was inside. Cinnamon plug-ins. Kiana's doing. Walter hated artificial scents. Every little thing, every word, every memory. I wasn't sure why I was writing it all down, but something in my gut told me I'd need it. By the 5th day, I worked up the courage to walk through the neighborhood again. It was a quiet afternoon, early fall, and kids were still in school. Leaves starting to curl brown at the edges. I walked slowly, partly from the hip pain, partly because my feet didn't know where they were going. And then I saw her, Tanisha Price, my neighbor of nearly 20 years. She lived 2 doors down. Tall woman with a commanding voice, always wore those satin scarves around her braids, worked from home. I used to hear her on Zoom calls fussing at people with love in her tone. She was sweeping her porch when she spotted me. "Hattie?" she said, her voice climbing up into disbelief. "Is that really you?" I tried to smile. "In the flesh." She put down the broom and came straight down the steps. "Girl, I thought you were still in the rehab place. I've been wondering why I didn't see you coming back. Then one day your name was off the mailbox and I thought, no, that ain't right." "It ain't," I said quietly. We sat on her porch steps, the warm concrete beneath us. I told her everything, every detail. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was past the point of crying. I was dry, empty. When I finished, Tanisha stared out at the sidewalk. Her mouth was tight. Her brow was furrowed. She looked like someone holding back an earthquake. She stood up suddenly. "Wait right here." She went inside. I heard her rummaging. When she came back, she had an old phone in her hand. Cracked screen, purple case. She tapped a few times, then handed it to me. "Press play," she said. I did. The audio was a little grainy, but clear enough. I heard Kiana's voice, loud, unfiltered, standing on my porch like she owned it. "She don't even know what she signed," Kiana was saying, laughing. "Old lady's out. This is ours now." Then another voice, one I didn't recognize, said, "Ain't that risky?" Kiana again, "Please. She thinks we're doing her a favor. She won't remember half this in a week." My hand started shaking. "I recorded that the week you were coming home," Tanisha said. "I heard her out there bragging. Something told me, this ain't right." I looked up at her. She wasn't smug, she wasn't proud, she was angry, but not just for me. "This happened to too many folks," she said. "Old people get walked over and talked around, but not this time." She helped me make copies, printed screenshots, dug into HOA records, found the sale notice, found everything she could. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. The feeling didn't have a name yet, but it felt a lot like power, son. Tanisha Price didn't wear a cape. She didn't drive a fancy car or carry herself like some hero out of a book. But in that moment, when she played that recording, she became the lifeline I didn't know I was still hoping for. The kind of person who watches without saying much, the kind who listens when others brush you off, the kind who doesn't let a wrong sit quietly. After we finished listening to the clip, she took the phone back and locked it with a quick swipe. I was still frozen, staring, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. "She really said that," I mumbled, my voice brittle. Tanisha nodded, and I got more. "It ain't the only time she's run her mouth." It was strange how fast things started moving once truth entered the picture, like a dam cracking. Tanisha pulled me inside her house. She put a pot of coffee on, opened her laptop, and said, "We're going to find everything they don't want you to know." She didn't treat me like I was fragile. She didn't talk slow or give me that look people give you when they think you're one bad day away from a care home. She treated me like a woman with a case to build. First, she logged into her HOA portal. She showed me letters that had gone out, HOA notices, paint approvals, mailbox replacements, all submitted by Kiana, all in the last 3 weeks. "She's operating like she owns it," Tanisha said. "I guess on paper she does," I whispered. "Yeah," she shot back, "but on truth? On truth she don't." Then came the screenshots. Posts on Kiana's Facebook about finally getting their own place, with captions like, "New beginnings, fresh start," and a grinning selfie taken right there in my living room. I felt nauseous. Tanisha printed everything, every post, every document, every screenshot. She even dug into the local clerk's online portal and pulled a copy of the deed transfer. There it was, my name gone. Kiana and Marcus Taylor, owners, notarized. Commission ID didn't match the state registry when Ms. Spencer checked it later. Stamped. Dated 2 days after my second surgery. "I don't even remember what day of the week that was," I said. "They counted on that," Tanisha replied. "That's why they moved fast." I stared at the signature. My name. Slanted. Off. It looked like mine. Almost, but not quite. "They forged it?" Tanisha shook her head. "Could be. Could be you signed under meds. Could be they got someone else to fake witness. Point is, don't matter what they did, it matters how they did it. If they coerced you, that's a case. A case, not a theory, not a hope, a path." That word lit something in me, something I thought I'd lost. We stayed up past midnight. My notebook now had pages filled. Names, dates, screenshots, photos of the mailbox, even a sketch I did of my old living room with the antique chest I inherited from my grandmother now missing. "Want to go by?" Tanisha asked. "You can sit in my car, I'll drive slow, just to see what else they've changed." I shook my head. "I can't see it like that again, not until I'm walking through that door with keys in my hand." She nodded like she understood. We sat in silence for a while. She poured more coffee. Then she looked at me, not pitiful, not curious, just direct. "You ready to fight?" I met her eyes. I've never been readier in my life. The next morning, Tanisha took me to a little legal aid office near downtown. Nothing fancy, just a 2-room setup above a laundromat. But the woman sitting at the desk had steel in her spine. Ms. Spencer, elder law attorney, not afraid of snakes and pearls. Tanisha did most of the talking at first, explained what we had, the audio, the documents, the timeline. Then I handed over the notebook. Ms. Spencer read every page, didn't say a word until she'd finished. Then she looked up at me. "You've been wronged, Miss Reynolds," she said. "And I'd be honored to represent you." That moment, that sentence, it nearly broke me. Not because of the words, but because it was the first time in weeks someone had believed me, fully, without hesitation. She walked us through the steps. First, request a full certified copy of the deed transfer. Second, examine the notary. Was it valid? Real signature? Were they present? Third, file a claim of elder coercion and undue influence. My head was spinning, but it was the kind of spinning I welcomed. We spent the next 5 hours gathering everything. Miss Spencer took the flash drive Tanisha had brought. She scanned my ID. She asked me to write a formal statement. I wrote for over an hour, Every word came out like a scream I hadn't let out until now. And then, when it was all done, I reached into my purse. From the inside zipper, I pulled out a small USB stick, one I hadn't told anyone about yet. I handed it to her. "What's this?" "Security cam footage," I said, "from my front door. Marcus installed it last year, said it was for my protection. What he didn't know is I had it auto-backing up to my cloud. It was still linked to my email." Tanisha let out a low whistle. Ms. Spencer smiled for the first time, and this might be more open and shut than I thought. That evening, Tanisha and I sat on her porch again. The sun was low, the light golden and warm. She brought out a bottle of sweet tea and 2 glasses. "You know," she said, "some folks would have just folded, said it was too late." I nodded. I was one of those folks, for about a week. "You ain't now." "No," I said. "Now I'm the storm." She raised her glass. "To raising hell the polite way." We clinked. And as the crickets began to chirp and the porch light buzzed on overhead, I realized something. They took my house, but not my mind, not my story. And not the fight in me that was just beginning to rise. Tomorrow, we'd file the first motion. And Kiana? She was about to find out what happens when the woman you call senile walks into court with a folder thicker than your conscience. The morning we filed the first petition, the sky looked like it had secrets. Low gray clouds stretched across the horizon, heavy with silence. I stood outside Ms. Spencer's office in the same navy cardigan I wore the day Walter and I signed the papers on our home. It had gone thin in the elbows, but I didn't care. There was something grounding about it, like armor stitched from memory. Inside, Ms. Spencer handed me a thick stack of papers. She had a purse that looked more like a filing cabinet slung over her shoulder. Her words came crisp and steady. "We're filing for injunctive relief. That includes freezing the deed transfer, investigating the notary, and filing to reverse based on coercion. It's a long road, Miss Reynolds, but it's real." I nodded slowly, the words filtering in like warm air after a cold front. This was happening. This wasn't just scribbles in my notebook anymore. This was official, real, loud. Tanisha drove us back to the motel in her Honda with the cracked dashboard. No music. Just the hum of tires and the rattle of my heartbeat. I watched the trees pass and tried not to imagine Kiana picking out curtains in my kitchen. I failed. Back at the motel, we turned my little room into a war room. Papers stacked high, sticky notes taped to the dresser mirror. My notebook open, now thick with pages, Tanisha printed color-coded folders with names like financials, social, witnesses, and notary logs. It looked like a legal team had set up camp, except it was just 2 women and a printer from 2006. Ms. Spencer sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, flipping through the notary documents, her lips pressed tight. "This notary listed on the deed? Her commission number returns no active record in the state registry, and she lives 2 counties away." My pulse quickened. "So, it's invalid?" "Potentially. At the very least, questionable. But the real issue is whether she was even present when you signed, and I think we both know she wasn't." The room was quiet. I looked at the signature again. My own name, but not quite mine. Slanted wrong. Too neat. I remembered how blurry everything had felt in rehab. Kiana flipping pages in front of me saying, "Just a few insurance things. You were drugged. You were recovering. It's not consent if it's manipulated," Ms. Spencer said. "And if we get her to testify that she never met you, their whole claim collapses." The words settled in my chest like warm sand. For the first time since I left rehab, I felt like I had footing again. Tanisha stood and pulled a small stack of screenshots from her bag. These are texts and posts. Kiana bragging about the house, bragging before the transfer was even recorded. Look at the timestamps. There it was, a message from Kiana to someone named Yolanda. It read, "Just got her to sign. By the time she's out, it'll be our name on the door. Miss Spencer didn't even blink. "This is gold." I picked up one of the posts, Kiana smiling on my porch with the caption, "Settling in, new chapter begins." The comments were full of heart emojis and congratulations. Not one person asked what happened to the woman who lived there before. My hand shook as I folded the paper. It's like I vanished. Ms. Spencer looked up at me. "They wanted you to." I turned to my bag and pulled out the small flash drive I'd carried for weeks. I had nearly forgotten about it. I backed up the front porch camera before they changed the settings. The one Marcus installed last year. It still syncs to my cloud. Tanisha let out a low, slow whistle. Ms. Spencer leaned forward like I'd handed her a live grenade. "Please tell me it's time-stamped." "It is. Audio and video. I haven't watched it all yet." "We'll get it analyzed. If there's footage of you not being present or them discussing the plan, it could bury them." The air in the room changed. The tension didn't disappear, but it took on a new form. Not dread, but drive. Purpose. Drive replaced dread. We weren't waiting for a break. We were making one. That evening, I sat on Tanisha's porch with a glass of cold sweet tea in my hand. We didn't talk for a while, just watched the sun dip behind the tree, our silhouettes long against the sidewalk. Then Tanisha broke the silence. "You know, there are folks who roll over, say they're too old to fight, say it's not worth it." I stared into my glass. I might have been one of those folks, for a minute. She smiled. "You're not now." "No," I said quietly. "Now I'm something else entirely." Later that night, back at the motel, I stepped into the shower and let the water hit my back. I closed my eyes and leaned against the cold tile. The steam fogged up the mirror and the walls. It felt like all the years I'd spent holding back were being washed away, one heartbeat at a time. I wrapped myself in a towel and sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. A message came in from Marcus. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask if I was okay. He said, "Why are you doing this? We were just trying to help. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." I stared at the screen. Then I typed one sentence. "You underestimated the woman who raised you." Then I powered the phone off and slid it into the drawer. Ms. Spencer returned the next morning with a briefcase full of new documents and a grin like someone who knows a storm's coming and is ready to direct traffic through it. "We have grounds," she said, "and now we push for a court date." I followed her to the courthouse steps. This time I didn't need help up the stairs. My cane tapped steadily against the stone as I climbed. When we reached the landing, I turned and looked out at the city below. I wasn't just some old woman trying to get her house back. I was a witness. I was the evidence. And I was walking into court with the truth in one hand and a lawyer in the other. The clerk inside was polite but disinterested. If people fought for their lives every day and he'd seen it all before. Ms. Spencer spoke with quiet confidence, handed over documents, asked the right questions. I sat beside her in a hard plastic chair, legs crossed, hands folded like a schoolgirl waiting for a test result. When the paperwork was finally accepted, the clerk stamped the last page and looked up. "You'll receive confirmation in 5 to 7 business days. Once it's reviewed, the judge will determine if a hearing is warranted." "It's warranted," Ms. Spencer said flatly. Then she stood. We stepped outside. I breathed in the crisp air. I didn't know if I'd win. I didn't know if the judge would see through the lies, but I knew this much. I wasn't confused, and I sure as hell wasn't finished. I found out they filed for guardianship on a Thursday. Ms. Spencer called me mid-morning while I was brushing crumbs off the motel's tiny table, trying to make space to eat my cereal from a paper bowl. "They're trying to beat us to court," she said. "Emergency filing. They're claiming you're showing signs of confusion, instability, and paranoia." My hand stopped mid-swipe. "Confusion," I repeated. "They think I'm confused." "They don't think it. They're banking on it." I sat down slowly, the paper bowl still in my hand, the milk inside swirling in tiny circles. "Is it going to stop us?" No, she said, but it's going to complicate things. We need to act fast. She had already pulled the rehab records, all of them, the discharge summary, the cognitive assessments, even the therapist's notes. Ms. Spencer read from one of the reports. Patient demonstrates full orientation, accurate recall of personal and historical details, and coherent decision-making capacity. So much for confused, I muttered. Still, she said we needed a fresh evaluation. Independent, clean, done outside the system. I know someone, she said. He's discreet, and he's thorough. 2 days later, I was sitting in a softly lit office across from Dr. Maynard, a quiet man with calm eyes and a stethoscope that seemed more symbolic than useful. He didn't rush me, didn't treat me like glass. We talked about everything. My daily habits, my memory, Walter, birds, the grocery store that used to be on 3rd Street. At one point, he handed me a newspaper from a week ago and asked me to summarize the main article. I told him it was poorly written, biased, and that the editor who let it through should be fired. He smiled. I'm going to write that you have excellent judgment. It wasn't just a formality. It was a reclamation. Every sentence I said, every detail I recalled, every joke I cracked was me stitching myself back together. When the evaluation was over, he stood and shook my hand firmly. You're one of the sharpest clients I've ever had, Miss Reynolds. You better put that in writing. I already have. Ms. Spencer filed the report with the court the same day, stapled neatly to our response to the guardianship motion. She delivered it in person, told me later the clerk who accepted the file did a double take at how thick our binder was. They came with 4 pages, she said. We came with 40. The next day, I got a text from Marcus. This is getting out of hand, Mama. Kiana's just trying to protect you. Protect me? I didn't respond. Not at first. I stared at the message like it was a piece of trash that had blown in through an open window. Something ugly I hadn't invited. But later that night, I opened my notebook and wrote, You protect someone by standing between them and the fire, not by lighting the match. That line stayed with me. The next morning, Tanisha brought breakfast, biscuits and gravy. I hadn't had an appetite in weeks, but that morning I ate every bite. They don't know who they're messing with, she said, sipping her coffee. You know that, right? I'm starting to. Mr. Spencer called again. We got the court date 2 weeks from today, 9:30 a.m. Courtroom 3C inked in red on Mrs. Spencer's pad like a heartbeat. I took a breath and felt my spine straighten. 2 weeks, 14 days isn't long, unless your whole life is folded into a motel drawer. That night, I started preparing what I wanted to say in court. Not just the facts, not just the documents, my truth, my voice, my story. I thought about Ruth from the rehab center, about the woman whose daughter sold her home while she was still healing from hip surgery. I thought about the other women I'd met over the years who got quiet when someone brought up family, women who lived small because they were told they'd already had their turn. I thought about Walter, too, how proud he'd be, how angry. I sat at that table in my little motel room and wrote for hours. I wrote about how I built that house into a home, how I kept every warranty, every manual, every receipt for 30 years, how I remembered when the fence post was replaced, how I knew the creak in the back hallway wasn't the floorboards, it was the pipe that never got fixed right. They could say I was confused, but I remembered everything. I remembered Marcus's first birthday in the living room, with cake on the sofa cushions. I remembered the night Walter died, and how the whole house felt hollow. I remembered putting up the bird feeder, and how the cardinals came first. I remembered, and I'd remember it all under oath. One afternoon, Tanisha and I sat in her backyard while she sorted through more printouts. Look at this, she said, holding up a blurry screenshot from Kiana's Instagram story. It was a boomerang video. Kiana in my kitchen, clinking glasses with a friend, giggling under a caption, "Claim what you deserve." I stared at the image. She posted this the day before you got home, Tanisha said. I didn't need to respond. I just nodded and took the paper. I added it to the binder. Nothing would be left out. I was going to court not just with evidence, but with narrative, with memory, with voice. Ms. Spencer said something to me later that week I'll never forget. Most people lose these cases not because they don't have a story, but because they don't know how to tell it. You've already told it. Every sentence, every record, every tear. Now we just package it with a bow and walk it into court. Tanisha drove me to the courthouse for the pre-hearing review. I wore the navy cardigan again. My spine felt straighter in it, my chin higher. The clerk handed us a printed schedule. It said, Reynolds vs. Taylor, motion to reverse transfer and dismiss guardianship petition. Seeing it in black and white gave me a jolt. This was happening. As we left the courthouse, Tanisha asked, "You nervous?" I paused. "No, not nervous." "Then what?" I thought about it. "I'm ready. That's what I am. Ready to remind them who I am. Ready to remind the court, the judge, and my own son that I'm not just some old woman with a foggy memory and a warm smile." I looked at her. I'm the reason he ever had a roof over his head, and I remember every nail that built it. The envelope arrived with no ceremony. No knock, no call, no warning. Just slipped beneath the door of my motel room like a whisper. I found it that morning, white against the stained carpet, with the court's seal stamped in blue. Inside, the date, the courtroom, the docket number. It was real now. No more waiting, no more paperwork, no more back and forths. The trial had a time, a place, and I had a chance to speak. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hand, September 14th, courtroom 3C, Judge Eleanor Grant presiding. I'd never heard her name before, but Ms. Spencer had. "Fair, sharp, doesn't suffer nonsense," she said. "That's good for us." She handed me a printed list of prep items, affidavits, exhibits, declarations, but the last item was circled in red, narrative statement. "Your story, start to finish. You'll only get 10, maybe 15 minutes if she allows it. We need to make it count." I knew what I wanted to say. I'd known it since the day I stood outside my house, key no longer fitting the lock. The next 2 weeks passed like a strange mix of fog and fire. Time blurred, but everything we did was sharp, deliberate. Ms. Spencer rehearsed opening statements in the motel room, her voice calm even when she was grilling me with fake cross-examination questions. Tanisha played the role of hostile witness, occasionally throwing in a sarcastic, "Objection, Your Honor," just to lighten the mood. At night, I wrote pages and pages. I edited my statement until the words felt like bone. I wasn't there to convince the court I was lovable. I wasn't asking for pity. I was there to show them I had memory, mind, and a mountain of proof. The closer the date got, the louder Kiana got online. Ms. Spencer pulled up screenshots every few days. Kiana tweeting, "Not everyone old is wise and some are just bitter." On Facebook, gratitude is rare these days, but that won't stop us from building our dream home. And finally, a TikTok video, a time-lapse of the living room being painted, my living room, with a voiceover from Kiana. New walls, new energy, new life. I watched the paint roll over the memories. Fresh color can't cover rot. "They really think they've already won," I said. "They have no idea what's coming," Ms. Spencer replied. 3 days before trial, I received a letter from Marcus, handwritten. The envelope smelled faintly of cologne, like he thought scent would soften the words. He didn't apologize. He didn't retract anything. He just said, "Mama, this has gotten out of hand. Kiana didn't mean for it to get this far. We were just trying to help. We thought maybe you weren't thinking clearly. But now it's too public. Everyone's watching. Maybe we can fix it quietly." Quiet. That word stuck in my throat like dry bread. I had been quiet when Kiana called me outdated. I had been quiet when they brought realtors into my home. I had been quiet when the locks were changed. Not anymore. I tore the letter once, then again, folded the scraps into my notebook. Evidence in its own way. Tanisha came by that night with a new outfit folded over her arm. I don't know what you were planning to wear, but you're not showing up in that cardigan again. It's powerful, but you need something that says you're not just strong, you're in charge. It was a soft gray pantsuit, tailored, simple, elegant. I held it to my chest and whispered, "Walter would have loved this." She smiled, "Then wear it like a badge." The morning of the trial, I woke up at 5, not from nerves, from focus. I braided my hair tight, the way I used to when I worked long days at the flower shop. Practical, steady. I put on the pantsuit, slipped the binder into my bag, took one last look in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who remembered. Courtroom 3C smelled like cold air and paper, the kind of place where people come to lose things or take them back. Kiana was already seated at the defendant's table, perfectly styled, arms folded like she was bored already. Marcus sat beside her, shoulders hunched, not looking up. When I entered, she smiled. The same smile she gave me the day she handed me a duffel bag on my own front porch. I ignored her. Ms. Spencer sat beside me and leaned in. "Just tell the truth. Let them bury themselves." Judge Grant entered. Sharp eyes, neutral tone. She went through the docket like someone slicing bread. Then she said, "Let's begin with the plaintiff's statement." And just like that, it was my turn. I stood. My knees didn't shake. "My name is Hattie Reynolds, 66. I bought my home in 1989, raised a son there, buried a husband there, and 2 months ago I came home from rehab to find my name stripped off the deed and my keys no good." I paused, looked at the judge. I am not confused. I am not unstable. And I did not willingly sign away my home. I signed insurance paperwork under pain medication, trusting my family. And they used that trust to take what wasn't theirs. I continued, step by step, telling the court about the rehab stay, the lack of visitors, the forged notary, the Facebook posts, the video footage. I told them about the paint, the texts, the lie that I was losing my memory. When I finished, the room was silent. Ms. Spencer stood next, guiding the court through each piece of documented evidence. She played the audio of Kiana bragging, "Old lady's out, this is ours now." Then she submitted the notary's affidavit, confirming she never witnessed my signature. It was over 15 minutes before Kiana's lawyer even stood up. They tried to argue it was a gift, a generous transfer, out of love. I sat there, stone still. Because what kind of love steals your keys while you're healing? What kind of love throws you into a motel and calls it protection? At the end of the session, Judge Grant didn't look at her notes. She looked at me, and she said, "Thank you, Miss Reynolds. Your clarity today speaks volumes." Then she turned to Kiana. "I find it deeply concerning," she said, "that you filed for guardianship days after a property was transferred under such questionable conditions. The timing, the evidence, and the conduct suggest a pattern of exploitation." The room went still. Kiana stopped smiling, and Marcus finally looked up. But I didn't look back. Judge Grant tapped her gavel once. "Decision will be issued in 48 hours. In the meantime, I am issuing a temporary order to freeze the property, reinstate Miss Reynolds' access, and block all third-party alterations." I exhaled for the first time in days. Not victory, not yet, but the tide had turned. And for the first time, they were the ones who looked scared. The next 48 hours didn't pass. They dragged. Time crawled like it was afraid to reach the finish line. I barely slept. I didn't eat much. I just sat with Tanisha in her kitchen and stared at the wall like it owed me answers. Then the call came. Ms. Spencer's voice was brisk, clipped. Not panicked, but definitely sharpened. "Court moved it up. Judge wants both parties back tomorrow. Morning. First session." "Why?" I asked. She didn't say, but her clerk told me something was entered into the record last minute, submitted anonymously. A strange weight settled in my chest. Tanisha pulled out her phone like she was already expecting something. She tapped a few times, then slid it across the table. There on the screen was a file, My porch. My camera. The one Marcus had installed for my safety. The one I'd nearly forgotten was still syncing to my old cloud storage. The footage was dated 2 days before I returned from rehab. It started slow. Just the porch, the railing, the shadows of leaves overhead. Then Kiana appeared. She was on her phone. She paced. She didn't know the camera was recording. If that woman shows up with a lawyer, we're screwed. My breath caught. I told Marcus to keep her calm. That's why we filed the guardianship. Make her look confused, and the house is locked. She laughed. I don't care if she cries. Let her cry. It's done. I didn't blink. I couldn't. Every syllable came down like a hammer on my ribs. Tanisha just said, I'm guessing that's what the judge saw. The next morning, courtroom 3C felt different. Not colder, cleaner, like the air had been scrubbed. I walked in wearing the gray pantsuit Tanisha had insisted on. My steps felt solid. I didn't look at Kiana. I didn't even check if Marcus showed up. I walked straight to my seat beside Ms. Spencer, who was already pulling out a fresh legal pad and a thumb drive. Judge Grant entered moments later. No preamble, no pleasantries. A new video was entered into the record, she said, adjusting her glasses. It contains both visual and audio evidence that directly contradicts the defense's claims of good faith. Kiana stiffened. The judge continued, We'll be playing the video in open court, now. If counsel objects, note it for the record, Judge Grant added. The public interest outweighs discomfort. The lights dimmed slightly, the screen was wheeled forward, and there she was, Kiana on my porch, not smiling, not performing, not posing for social media, just real and cruel. If that woman shows up with a lawyer, we're screwed. Push guardianship. Make her look unstable. She won't remember. She never remembers. Let her cry. It's done. The laughter at the end hit harder than anything else. That laugh didn't just mock me, it mocked the court. It mocked justice. Silence followed, thick, unmovable. The bailiff wheeled the monitor away. Judge Grant folded her hands. Miss Dawson, she said, using Kiana's maiden name like a scalpel, would you like to explain what we just heard? Kiana opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lawyer whispered something, but she just shook her head. That was taken out of context, she finally said, her voice barely audible. The judge nodded slowly. I understand. The context being that you believed this woman, Miss Reynolds, was vulnerable enough to strip of her rights, and you were confident no one would believe her. That is the context, yes? Kiana didn't respond. Let the record reflect, Judge Grant continued, that this video, coupled with the notarization irregularities, the social media posts, the testimony already heard, and the witness affidavits, establishes a pattern of calculated exploitation. Marcus stared at his hands. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't react. Ms. Spencer stood, calm, measured. Your Honor, we have no further comments. The facts have spoken. The judge nodded. I will now issue my ruling. My fingers gripped the table. In the matter of guardianship, the petition is denied with prejudice. Miss Reynolds has full mental capacity and autonomy. My throat tightened, but she wasn't done. In the matter of the property transfer, this court finds it was obtained through coercion and deception. The deed is reversed. Ownership restored to Miss Reynolds. All rights reinstated immediately. Kiana let out a sharp breath. Not a sob, not a protest, just air escaping a balloon that had finally popped. The court further orders that Miss Dawson and Mr. Taylor vacate the property within 72 hours. No removal of items not proven to be personally theirs. Law enforcement will oversee the transition. Still not done. Due to the nature of the evidence, Judge Grant added, this matter is referred to the district attorney's elder exploitation unit for charging review. Then came the gavel. One knock. Clear, cold, final. As the courtroom emptied, Kiana walked fast. Her heels clicked too loud against the floor. Marcus followed behind her like a boy who'd gotten caught with a stolen toy he didn't even want anymore. I stood, turned, didn't speak, didn't nod. Didn't give them the dignity of acknowledgement. Ms. Spencer smiled. A rare thing. She shook my hand. Not just a win, she said. A reckoning. Tanisha met me outside. She didn't say anything either, just hugged me hard. Her arms were warm and solid and safe. I stepped down the courthouse stairs slowly, not because I was weak, because I was savoring it. Freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a breath you finally get to take without flinching. At the bottom of the steps, a reporter tried to approach. I waved her off. This wasn't a headline. It was a life reclaimed. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The same wall I'd stared at while wondering if I'd ever get my life back. Now, it was time to go home. Real home. Mine. Not because a court said so, not because a gavel declared it, but because I had earned it back. Piece by piece, word by word. Because sometimes justice doesn't come dressed in gold. Sometimes it wears gray walls, dry gavel thuds, and a 66-year-old woman who remembered more than they expected and fought harder than they deserved. I didn't rush packing the motel room. I took my time folding each sweater, each slip of paper, each part of the strange little life I had been forced into. The walls had no personality, but they had heard my prayers. The mattress was stiff, but it had held me through the nights when I didn't know if I'd see justice. I didn't say goodbye to it, but I gave it a nod. Tanisha came with her van, humming as always, like this was any other Tuesday. We didn't speak much during the drive. We didn't have to. When we pulled up to the house, my house, it looked different. Not physically. The siding was the same. The mailbox still had their name taped over mine, though that would change soon. The blinds were closed. The porch light was off. The bird feeder was empty, but I could feel something had shifted. Like the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting. Ms. Spencer met us there, keys in hand, and a copy of the judge's order tucked into a neat leather folder. Behind her stood an officer, clipboard ready to confirm Marcus, and Kiana had complied. They left yesterday afternoon, Ms. Spencer said. Didn't take much, no resistance. Cowards never leave loud, Tanisha muttered. The officer unlocked the door. It creaked. I stepped inside. The air was stale, like they'd closed every window for weeks. The furniture had been rearranged, the dining table replaced with something glossy and soulless. My curtains replaced with sheer white ones that didn't even keep out the sun. I stood still in the doorway. Then I moved slowly, one step at a time. My footsteps echoed. The house didn't feel lived in, it felt staged, gutted, like someone had tried to erase the history in here with surface-level upgrades. But history doesn't scrub that easy. My wall clock still hung in the kitchen, the one Walter gave me when we moved in. A crack on the frame, still tilted slightly to the left. I straightened it. The cabinet still had my handwriting inside, little labels from 20 years ago. Holiday dishes, cookie cutters, Walter's coffee mugs. My home hadn't been taken. It had been borrowed by people who didn't know how to love it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened every window, let the wind in, the light, the sound of birds returning to the yard. Tanisha walked through the place behind me. She didn't say a word, just helped me move the new furniture out to the garage piece by piece, like we were peeling off a bad memory. We scrubbed counters, dusted windowsills, lit a candle that smelled like vanilla and lemon and old joy. Then we sat on the porch, and for the first time in months, I let my shoulders drop. "You didn't have to help me," I said softly. Tanisha shook her head. "No, but I wanted to." She reached into her purse and pulled out a spare key she had made weeks ago. "In case they ever locked you out again," she said. "You've got an army now." I took the key, slipped it into my pocket. That small, cold piece of metal weighed more than gold. That evening, I changed the locks, hung a new wreath on the door, turned the porch light on. and wrote a new note for the mailbox, Miss Hattie Reynolds, owner and occupant. I updated my will the next day. No more confusion, no more loopholes, no more trusting in silence. Everything was now going to charity. I left a small note tucked into the documents. If my son ever finds his way back, he'll find the door open. But the deed will never be. It's been 3 weeks since the trial. The house is clean now. Not just the floors, but the spirit. Neighbors drop off muffins, strangers leave notes in the mailbox saying they saw the story online. I don't reply to most of them. I don't need applause, just peace. Peace and presence. Tanisha and I sit on the porch every evening, sweet tea in hand, laughing louder than we should, watching the sun dip low behind the maple tree in the yard. We talk about nothing. We talk about everything. One night I said, "I think they expected me to disappear." She looked at me. "They expected the story to end in silence," I continued. "An old woman fades away, forgotten, confused." Tanisha took a long sip of her tea. "Well," she said, "you rewrote that ending." And she was right. I didn't just come home, I reclaimed it, light by light, room by room, memory by memory, and I'm leaving them all on. For anyone who ever wonders what happens when the woman they counted out remembers who she is. Miss Hattie Reynolds lives here, Mayas. And now the lights stay on. For every woman they thought would fade quietly. If your family tried to take your home while calling it help, what would you do? And do you think Miss Hattie did the right thing by walking away with just the house? Or should she have pressed charges too? If this story hit close to home, go ahead and like the video. Then subscribe and tap that bell so you don't miss the next one. And if someone you know needs to hear this, send it to them right now. Another story's already waiting on your screen, and I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.